I am pleased to be here this morning, and this is the first opportunity that I've had to address a chapel audience. So I don't plan to talk to you in any chapel language or anything of the kind. I don't feel that I'm endeared enough to talk to you about religion, anything of the kind. I would like to share with you very briefly some concerns of mine, and maybe there are some concerns of yours. I try to read the paper every morning before I leave the house, and I'm not always successful. I was terribly angry at the Minneapolis Tribune Saturday because when I got my paper, it was one of the 69,000 that didn't have the comics in it. So I picked up this morning's paper, and lo and behold, they printed the Saturday comics and didn't even identify them as Saturday. And it didn't make sense because what had happened, I'd read the Sunday morning comics and I jumped ahead. So it was sort of backing up. So I might be somewhat like that this morning because it all started on Saturday morning when I didn't get an opportunity to read my funnies. But at any rate, in this morning's paper, right on the front pages, and I would have brought it with me, but I would have had to clip it out of my paper, and my wife would have been angry if I had torn it out of the front page. But there was an interesting thing on the front page of this morning's paper, and I know each of you have probably read it because all students read the newspapers, you know. There was an article in there about, I think there were about 3 students. This was in Hutchinson, Kansas, high school students that were fed up with their newspaper, their high school paper, and they decided to put one together on their own. And it was very interesting in the kinds of things that, and I look at this as being typical of the kind of education that some of our institutions of higher learning are passing off to our young people. And and I would strongly suggest to you that before the day has ended, that you borrow someone's paper. You don't have to buy it. I'm sure you have a copy of it in your library here, and read that article, because some of the kinds of things that they were saying and how we have erected defenses around our youth today. We're going to protect them and shield them against all of those nasty things, and the extent that the students weren't allowed to read all of the good parts of Macbeth because it might corrupt their minds. I cite that to you because I think it's the kind of thing that's going on across the land, and I'm pretty sure that some of you may have had experiences akin to that here in your own Augsburg College, not in terms of the newspaper. I can't talk about your newspaper because I haven't read it recently. So I don't know whether or not you really report the news, or whether what you report in there is what your advisor will allow you to print, which, irrespective of whether it's saying anything or not. And sometimes I wonder if this isn't the kind of thing that we get into in our colleges and universities and in our whole school system, is that we pass on as education those kinds of things that we have been unfortunate enough to have had passed on to us. And when we pass it on to an inquiring mind, it can get to be terribly frustrating. And I think this is a kind of thing that the young people are questioning now. I had an experience last Wednesday. I spent Wednesday morning at Spring Lake Park High School, and it was a very interesting experience. And some of the young people out there raised some questions that I thought were rather challenging and had not expected that of them. And one comment that I made to them, and I believe I would make the same comment to you this morning as I look about the audience to see the tremendous mixture that we've got here, varying colors and what have you. We had a similar mixture at Spring Lake Park. And the point that I made to them was that I feel that although they had a very fancy building there and the latest equipment, they were still being deprived of what I would consider a well-rounded education. For one thing, they were being deprived of an opportunity to get to know me personally, or people like me. And that, to me, I'm selfish enough to think that's a real deprivation on anybody's part. But part of what happens is that now some of those young people will leave Spring Lake Park High School and will come to Augsburg College. They will go to St. Catherine's, or they will go to Bemidji State, and they will go to St. Cloud, and they will go to Augustana, and so on. And they will have been educated in an unreal world, because when they leave Spring Lake Park to go to college, chances are very few, if any, are going to return there to live. And when they leave, they most certainly aren't going to live at Bemidji State or St. Cloud. So where are they going? Chances are they're going to an urban center somewhere, because that's where the majority of the people are living today. And if they go to an urban center anywhere in this country, they are going to run into people of varying colors and religions, and people who with varying ways of doing things and thinking things. So they aren't going to be prepared. And part of what is going to have to happen is that an education that should have taken 20 years in the making is going to have to take place in a period of months or a couple of years. So we become terribly frustrated over the kinds of actions that go on in North Minneapolis. Or we are terribly frustrated about why all of the clamor over the seating of one little black man on that mayor's on the Civil Rights Commission, and we don't quite understand, why. And the question we might raise, well, after all, he has a police record, and aren't there Negroes without police records? Sure, there are a few of us who don't have police records, but if your education has been going on, and I mean a real education where you've been exposed to some of the facts of life and some of the realities that groups of people have to face, then you would be aware of how the Negro in this country has been systematically denied a wide range of opportunities, and how he has been systematically given police records in some instances. And if you've been following the newspapers again, there was an interesting report that appeared in yesterday's paper about the riots in Newark, New Jersey, where this high-level commission that consisted of 2 former governors and several other well-respected people said that there was police brutality, and that this whole thing, the way it was handled, was a real sham. And many of those people in there, Leroy Jones included, have ended up with a police record. Now, if this is the kind of thing that would deprive one of being of further service to his community, then I think we need to rethink what we mean by justice. Then we don't mean what we say by rote when we, and I'm sure each of you have cited the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and I'm wondering how many of you, when you say that, really know what you're saying. Is this just a rote exercise? And you go, I pledge allegiance to the flag. Why must you pledge an allegiance to a flag? What has that flag got to do with you? The flag, a piece of material, some stars and stripes that, most certainly have no feeling. It's some material. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands. What does a flag stand for? That flag doesn't stand for anything. It's what the people stand for. And if you don't stand for anything, what's the sense of talking about a flag? One nation. What's a nation? That's a group of people. And a nation, you can take a nation as such. A nation has no identity separate and apart from the people. And you say one nation indivisible, and what you're talking about is one people. And if we're talking about one people, then I'm a part of that people that you're talking about. But you most certainly cannot say indivisible, because we've been most divisible in this country. That we practiced the so-called separate but equal for these many years, and The only thing that really has changed about it is that the Supreme Court said that it should not be, but in South Carolina, they didn't believe that. So 1964 came along, and the civil rights legislation came through, and saying that I should be allowed to do all sorts of things. Now, if that pledge that we cite by rote had any meaning, then why the heck a Civil Rights Act for 1964? You know, if I'm a part of that indivisible people that you're talking about, then you don't need this special legislation for me. And what you're saying is that you haven't been honest. You know, you haven't been sincere. You've been cheating a little bit. So I've got to pass some special laws to make this all right. And now I'm going to say that I'm not going to cheat against you. But that was done, and the people in Orangeburg, South Carolina said, you know, to heck with it, that we still want our segregated bowling alley. So they still have that segregated bowling alley. Now, the state didn't hesitate one moment to call out the National Guards to put down a rebellion, so to speak. But the Attorney General's office did not act to desegregate that bowling alley until after 3 students had died. The question I raise is why? You know, why? Yet we are talking about one nation indivisible. And then you say, with liberty and justice for all. Then I'm not a part of that all. I couldn't possibly be, because I have lived for 33 years, and I most certainly have not lived under what I would consider absolute liberty and justice. I haven't been able to take it for granted. You know, I know that I'm free, and you haven't given me my freedom, and no one can give me my freedom. I've got it, you know, and I'm not asking you to give it to me. So that, but if you mean with liberty and justice for all, then I've got to be included. You know, all is all inclusive. You know, there are no, when one says all, there are no exceptions. We're talking about everybody that lives within this country. And we say with liberty and justice for all. So if you don't mean that, and if I'm not included in that, then don't ever, you know, tell that lie when you stand up and rotely recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, if you want to make a pledge, you see, let's not pledge to the flag. You know, let's pledge that allegiance to our fellow man. You know, this is this is Brotherhood Week, so to speak, and National Negro History Week. Governor Lavander made a zillion and one proclamations last week, and he proclaimed everything. You know, he proclaimed this to be Brotherhood Week, and he proclaimed this to be you know, National Negro History Week. You know, I don't want you to be my brother during Brotherhood Week. You know. And I don't want you to study about me during National Negro History Week. You know, if I can't be your brother 365 days out of the year, and this is leap year, I believe, so I'd want to be at 366 days this year. If I can't be your brother 365 and let's say 1/4 days a year, every year that you're alive and that I'm alive, then I most certainly don't need you as a brother during Brotherhood Week. And if you aren't concerned about knowing something about people who live in your country and preceded you here, then I don't think, if you don't want to know that every day out of the year, then don't study about me in 1 week, because I'm too important. Too many things have happened to me for you to learn anything about me really in 1 week. It's almost like trying to learn about what's going on in the world today by the few comments or remarks that I might make. I would like to make a closing comment in that I hope that no one here feels that I am a Negro leader. Because there's something about that kind of labeling that bothers me, because I don't lead anybody, and I'm not even a very good follower. So the comments that I might make are comments coming from T. Williams, who has had a wide range of experiences and exposures, and if there are other people who happen to think as I think, then well and good. I hope that, in fact, I know that most people don't think as I do, and maybe it's good that they don't. And I hope that everyone never thinks as I do, where everybody in this city or elsewhere is thinking as T. Williams thinks, then we really would be in trouble, because that just wouldn't be it. I would like to make a couple of suggestions to you, since you're all in the process of becoming very learned individuals. I'd recommend a couple of books for your reading, and will extend an invitation to you to attend our Gaylor event coming up. One of the books that I have here is this little book here. It's entitled The Nigger Bible, and it's written by Robert H. DeCoy. And Mr. DeCoy is going to be the featured speaker at our annual meeting at the Phyllis Wheatley Community Center on March 21st. Mr. DeCoy is a very interesting individual and has written a very interesting book that I'm sure is calculated to make many of you in this audience quite angry and terribly upset and disturbed if you read it. And the other book that I would suggest that would be much more palatable to your reading, it's a little book that's about 135 pages, that's written by C. Eric Lincoln, and the name of that book is My Face is Black. And Mr. Lincoln is a minister. He's a Methodist minister. Mr. DeCoy is, I don't know what to call Mr. DeCoy, but I would like to read, as I close out here, just one comment from Mr. DeCoy's book. And it's a part of his Proverbs. It's entitled Proverbs and Notes to My Nigger Son. And it reads as follows. Say, in argument with Jew or Christian, never take the moral point of view. You will never win with points on morality. You will only gain verbal concessions from your opponents, which are but crumbs from the table, for they are the concoctors of the very morality you cherish, seated in feast on the main courses. Thank you.